Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, we hear from Senator Bernie Sanders as the Democratic National Convention begins. Plus, President Joe Biden offers a kind of farewell on the convention stage, and former President Donald Trump might get a major delay to his hush money sentencing. The Democratic National Convention is underway in Chicago, and on the convention's first day, USA Today White House correspondent Swapna Venugopal Ramaswamy spoke with Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders about the Biden administration, Vice President Kamala Harris's economic plans, and more.
Thank you so much for coming here, Senator Sanders. Nice to have you.
My pleasure.
Friday was the big unveiling of Kamala Harris's economic plan. What are your impressions, and do you think she can pay for it?
I do, and I was impressed. I think we still have a long way to go, but I think it's an excellent start. And what I was excited about is continuing what President Biden has been working on, is lowering the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country. As you may know, we pay the highest prices in the world, and my hope is that the day will come soon under a President Harris where we're not going to pay any more than other countries, which means lowering prescription drug costs in half. That's a good start. I like the idea of building 3 million units of affordable housing and low-income housing, because we have a housing crisis one end of this country to the other. I like the idea of canceling medical debt. When you get cancer and you run up huge bills, you know what? You should not have to go bankrupt to pay those bills. So I think it's a good start. Obviously, it's going to have to get fleshed out more, and more is going to have to be done.
With regard to the Israel-Hamas war, you've always advocated for conditional aid to Israel. What do you want to see from Harris?
My own, and I speak only for myself. I am a strong supporter of what President Biden and the Vice President have done on domestic issues. But on this issue, I think the President is wrong. Israel had a right to defend itself against this horrible Hamas terrorist attack, but they did not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people, killing 30,000, mostly women, children, and elderly, injuring 80,000, destroying 60%, 65% of the housing, bombing every university, and now creating a situation where tens and tens of thousands of children face starvation because Israel's not letting humanitarian aid come through. So I believe that we should not be giving another nickel to Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government. That's my view. Obviously, I would hope that the Biden administration follows that. Up till now, they certainly have not.
So in terms of healthcare, Harris initially supported Medicare for all, but now she doesn't. And how do you feel about that?
Well, I would say that if you go out to the average American and you say, tell me about the healthcare system in this country, where we spend twice as much per person as the people of any other country, 85 million are uninsured or underinsured. Our life expectancy is shorter than the people of other countries. Our outcomes are not particularly good. Cannot be fixed by little fixes here and there. I think you need to move to a Medicare for all single-payer system. That has always been my view. I think a whole lot of people in this country agree with me. That is not the Vice President's view. It's not the President's view. The Affordable Care Act has done some important things. It has expanded health care to a whole lot of people. We've expanded Medicaid. That's good. But my own view is that this system is not working. We need to do what the Canadians do and people in many other countries. Guarantee health care to all people is a human right.
So, as you know, a couple of members of the progressive group, such as Scori Bush and Jamal Bowman, had lost their primaries.
Yes.
Do you think the progressives are losing ground in the Democratic Party?
Ilhan Omar last week won a very good victory. Look, but having raised that question, I'll tell you what I do think. And I think it should be a major priority for the Democrats and for the Vice President, and that is money in politics. Let's be clear. We have a campaign finance system today which is corrupt. You got to vote, I got to vote. but some billionaire can start a super PAC and put hundreds of millions of dollars into that. And that is primarily why Jamal Bowman was defeated and why Cori Bush. Record-breaking amounts of money came in from, in this case, a PAC, a super PAC, to defeat them. And that is not, to me, what democracy is about. So I believe we've got to overturn the Citizens United move to public funding of elections.
Okay, thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On the convention's first night, President Joe Biden took the stage. This week once would have been all about him. Instead, last night he offered a goodbye.
Let me know in my heart, when my days are through, America, America, I gave my best to you.
That's Biden quoting the Norah Jones song, American Anthem. The president wiped away tears after embracing his daughter, Ashley Biden, who introduced him to delegates. He and First Lady Jill Biden, who also spoke last night, quickly left Chicago after the president's speech and are not expected again at the convention this week. For more on day 2 of the Democratic National Convention, stay with usatoday.com. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched through Chicago yesterday as the Democratic Convention began. The crowd was significantly smaller than predicted and remained largely peaceful. Several people were arrested in the early evening after a few dozen protesters broke away from the march and pulled down sections of the first ring of security fencing surrounding the United Center where President Joe Biden spoke. Convention organizers said there was no threat to any protectees. Marches and protests planned for the duration of the convention highlight the biggest threat to the newly energized Democratic Party's unity, the war in Gaza, its 40,000-plus person death toll, and Biden's continuing support for Israel. Chicago is also home to the country's biggest Palestinian community. Former President Donald Trump wants a delay in his hush-money criminal sentencing until after the election. Will he get it? I spoke with USA Today Justice Department correspondent Aisha Bagchi for more. Hey there, Aisha.
Hey, Taylor. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So let's just start with this. What is Donald Trump's argument really for a sentencing delay here in this criminal hush money case?
Donald Trump raised multiple points. He said that his hush money sentencing date, it's currently set for September 18th, should be pushed back past the election because it's prejudicial to him. It hurts him politically, even to have the prosecution making a sentencing recommendation that becomes public. He also said that the Supreme Court has ruled that you have to deal with presidential immunity issues, at least when it comes to prosecuting a president or a former president, before you put them on trial. Now, this case is a little different because Donald Trump has already been on trial. But his point is basically you need to extend that to this type of case where he's challenging some of the evidence that came into the trial. And basically, he says if Judge Juan Merchan in this case rules that the conviction can stand, he should be able to appeal that and have higher courts weigh in even before he faces sentencing. And for that reason, the September 18th sentencing date has to be pushed back.
So, Aisha, is there any chance really for this delay? And also what happened yesterday?
Yesterday, a filing from the prosecution was made public that basically said the prosecution isn't taking a formal stance even to oppose Donald Trump's request for a delay in the sentencing. They said they're going to defer to the judge, and they made a few points about it. It seems like even prosecutors are a bit concerned that if the sentencing date stays as it's currently scheduled for September 18th, the court will have to undergo lots of preparation for that because whenever a former president comes to the court, there are a lot of security concerns that go into planning. And they seem to be a little worried that if Judge Merchan rules against Trump when it comes to presidential immunity and Trump appeals, an appellate court might jump in and say, hey, we agree with Donald Trump that you shouldn't go forward with this sentencing date until we've weighed in on whether any sentencing is appropriate. And that would upend the plans that are in place. They didn't go so far as to say they themselves think it should be delayed. They just said, this is something for you to consider, Judge, when you're deciding whether we're going to push back this sentencing date.
So the timing of this ahead of the November election is, of course, at the heart here. What might be the political repercussions, Aisha, of this decision one way or the other from Judge Merchan?
That's not really clear because it was always an open question what's going to happen at sentencing to begin with. And if Donald Trump won the election, what does that mean for any sentencing? First, when it comes to sentencing in this case, Judge Merchan has really a lot of discretion. Technically, he could sentence Trump to many years in prison, but also there's no minimum sentence of jail or prison at all. And plenty of people think that given it's a nonviolent offense, you would at least be looking at a sentence of incarceration that would be really low and potentially no sentence at all. Here, Judge Merchan is also probably going to have in his head the fact that there are political and social repercussions to whatever he does. So we can't really know if Judge Merchan would sentence Trump to time behind bars. I've talked to a lot of legal experts who've told me that even if he did that, the chances that Trump would be ordered to start that sentence before he ran out an appeal on all those issues are really low. So in terms of seeing Trump behind bars before the election, unlikely. What it does do is add to this environment in which a lot hinges on the election for Donald Trump. It's not just a question of whether he becomes president. It's also a question of his criminal situation. This was the one criminal case that went to trial. He was convicted. Now, maybe if his sentencing is pushed back, it's very likely to be the case that courts are going to decide that if he were sentenced to time behind bars, that he shouldn't be serving it if he is president of the United States. And then you can look at his other criminal cases. He has 3 other criminal cases that are pending out there. And again, if he becomes president, that is likely to push many of these matters back at least a long way. So the whole idea that his sentencing gets pushed back past the election just enhances this atmosphere in which it's not just what happens to the country after the election that's at stake, but it's also what happens to Trump in terms of his criminal cases that's at stake for him personally.
All right, great explainer. As always, Aisha Bagchi covers the Justice Department for USA Today. Thank you, Aisha.
Thanks, Taylor.
Former Congressman George Santos, who was expelled from the House after being indicted on 23 federal counts, including fraud and misusing campaign funds, pleaded guilty yesterday in federal court to 2 of the charges. Santos faces a mandatory 2-year minimum sentence after pleading guilty to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, but a judge estimated the term could range from 6 to 8 years behind bars when he's sentenced next February. Santos had faced trial in September on charges including laundering campaign funds to pay for his personal expenses, charging donors credit cards without their consent, and receiving unemployment benefits while he was employed. In a shaky voice in court, Santos said, quote, "I deeply regret my conduct and the harm it has caused and accept full responsibility for my actions." Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.